Most men think attraction is about looks, money, or confidence. They're wrong. Because attraction often starts much earlier than that. It starts in the first few seconds of a conversation. And more specifically, it starts with language. There are certain phrases that instantly change the emotional tone between you and a woman. Not because they're manipulative, not because they're pickup lines, but because they trigger something psychological. Curiosity, emotional tension, the feeling that you're different from every other guy she's talked to. And here's the interesting part. Most men never say these things, because most men either play it way too safe or they try way too hard. They compliment too much. They interview her. They explain themselves too much. And without realizing it, they kill attraction before it even has a chance to build. Neuropsychologists sometimes call this approach coding. The idea that certain words, tones, and emotional cues make someone feel safe enough to move toward you emotionally. And once you understand this, you'll never talk to women the same way again. Because attraction is rarely about saying more. It's about saying the right thing at the right moment. And today, I'm going to break down 3 phrases that trigger instant attraction in women. And more importantly, why they work. Not from a pickup artist perspective, from the perspective of female psychology, emotional connection, and the psychology of attraction. Because phrase number 1 triggers curiosity. Phrase number 2 creates emotional mirroring. And phrase number 3 is the most powerful one of all, because almost no men use it, and the ones who do immediately stand out. Before we get into the first phrase, you need to understand one thing. Women usually do not react to words themselves. They react to the emotional experience behind the words. That's the mistake so many men make. They think attraction is logical. They think, if I say the perfect thing, she'll like me. But attraction doesn't work like that. Attraction is emotional. It's about how you make someone feel in the moment. This is why one guy can say something incredibly simple, and she feels butterflies, while another guy can say all the right things, and she feels absolutely nothing. Psychologists often talk about something called the information gap theory. The idea is simple. People become emotionally engaged when they feel there is something they don't fully know yet, something unfinished, something they want to figure out. That creates curiosity. And curiosity is one of the fastest ways to create attraction. Because curiosity creates emotional investment. She starts thinking about you after the conversation is over. She starts replaying what you said. She starts wondering what you meant. And that is exactly where attraction often begins. So let's get into phrase number 1. Phrase number 1 is, "You seem like the kind of person who has a story behind that." This is one of the strongest phrases you can use because it immediately creates emotional depth. Most men stay on the surface. They ask boring questions. What do you do? Where are you from? What are your hobbies? And there's nothing wrong with those questions, but they don't create emotion. This phrase does, because instead of reacting to facts, you're reacting to who she is. You're telling her, I see something interesting about you. And that instantly makes the conversation feel different. For example, imagine she casually mentions that she moved to a new city alone. Most guys would say, "Oh, wow, that's cool." But you could say, "You seem like the kind of person who has a story behind that." Or maybe she mentions she used to play piano when she was younger. You could smile and say, "I feel like there's probably a really interesting story behind that." Notice what happens psychologically. You create an open loop. You don't force her to explain herself. You don't interrogate her. You simply create curiosity and give her space to step into it. And when a woman feels like you genuinely see something deeper in her, she starts feeling emotionally understood. That is incredibly attractive, because most people are starving to feel seen. From a neuropsychology perspective, this works because it activates anticipation and emotional reward pathways. When someone feels like they are about to reveal something meaningful, the brain releases dopamine. And dopamine is heavily connected to attraction, excitement, and emotional engagement. But here's the biggest mistake men make with this phrase. They overdo it. They try to sound deep. They say things like, "I can tell you've been through a lot," or "You have sad eyes." Don't do that. That feels fake, intense, and honestly a little creepy. The goal is not to sound mysterious. The goal is to sound observant. There is a huge difference. And before I get to phrase number 2, there is one more thing most men get wrong about phrase number 1. You cannot use it too early. If you say something like this within the first 10 seconds of meeting her, it feels forced. You need a little bit of context first. A detail she mentioned, a small opening. Then it works beautifully. Now phrase number 2 is even stronger, because it doesn't just create curiosity, it creates emotional mirroring. Phrase number 2 is, "You're different when you talk about that." This phrase is incredibly powerful because it tells her that you notice emotional shifts in her. And women pay attention to men who pay attention. For example, maybe she's talking about her job and she seems a little flat. But then suddenly she starts talking about traveling, music, animals, or something she truly loves, and her whole energy changes. Her eyes light up, she speaks faster, she smiles more. That is the moment you say, "You're different when you talk about that," or "You seem way more alive when you talk about that." This works because it creates what's called emotional mirroring. You're reflecting her emotional state back to her. And when people feel emotionally mirrored, they feel understood, safe, connected. This is a huge part of female psychology. Women are often attracted to men who make them feel emotionally seen without making them feel exposed. That's a very important distinction, because there is a difference between making someone feel understood and making someone feel analyzed. The reason this phrase works so well is because most people rarely hear it. Most people go through conversations feeling invisible, especially in dating. Most people are too busy trying to impress each other, too busy thinking about what to say next, too busy trying to look cool. But when you notice a shift in her energy and point it out, it makes her feel like you're actually present. And presence is attractive. From a psychology of attraction perspective, this also taps into something called self-expansion theory. People are naturally drawn toward people who make them feel more connected to their real selves. So when you point out the version of her that feels most alive, she unconsciously starts associating you with that feeling. But here is the biggest mistake men make with this phrase. They immediately ruin it by turning it into pressure. For example, "You're different when you talk about that. Why aren't you like that all the time?" Terrible idea. Now it feels like criticism. Or they say, "You're different when you talk about that. I like you better that way." Also bad. Now it sounds controlling. The point is not to judge her. The point is simply to notice her. And that alone is powerful. Now, before I get to phrase number 3, I want to mention something important. None of these phrases work if your energy feels needy. You cannot say the perfect words with desperate energy and expect attraction. Because women respond to congruence. Your tone matters. Your timing matters. Your body language matters. You have to say these things calmly, naturally, like you're simply noticing something true. Because phrase number 3 only works when it feels genuine. And phrase number 3 is probably the most powerful one in this entire video, because almost no men say it. Phrase number 3 is, "I feel like there's more to you than what you show people." This phrase is powerful because it touches identity, and identity is one of the deepest emotional triggers in attraction. Most people secretly want to believe that they are misunderstood in some way, that there is more to them than what people see on the surface. And when you say this to a woman at the right moment, It creates instant emotional tension because now she's wondering, what does he see in me? For example, imagine she's confident, funny, sarcastic, and playful. But every now and then you notice small moments where she gets quieter, more thoughtful, more vulnerable. That is when you can say something like, "You know what's interesting? I feel like there's more to you than what you show people." Or, "I feel like most people probably misunderstand you." That is incredibly powerful because you're no longer talking about what she looks like. You're talking about who she is. And that's rare. From a neuropsychology perspective, this works because it activates both curiosity and identity validation at the same time. She becomes curious about what you see in her, but she also feels validated. Like maybe you understand a part of her that other people miss. That creates emotional intimacy very quickly. And emotional intimacy is one of the strongest forms of instant attraction. But once again, there is a mistake that ruins this phrase. Actually, there are two mistakes. The first mistake is saying it too dramatically. You don't want to sound like you're in a movie scene. You don't want to say, "I can see the pain behind your smile." Please don't do that. The second mistake is saying this too early. If you say something this deep within the first few minutes, it can feel manipulative. This phrase works best after you've already had a little bit of conversation, a little bit of emotional context, a little bit of tension already built, because then it feels earned. And that's the key word here, earned. Now let's talk about how to combine all three of these phrases in a real conversation. Let's say you're talking to a woman and she mentions that she used to dance when she was younger. You could first say, "You're different when you talk about that." Then later, if she opens up more, you could say, "You seem like the kind of person who has a story behind that." And if the conversation becomes a little deeper, you could eventually say, "I feel like there's more to you than what you show people." See how each phrase builds on the previous one? Curiosity first, then emotional mirroring, then identity. That is what makes the conversation feel natural. And here are the three biggest mistakes that destroy all of this instantly. Number 1, using these phrases too early. Number 2, saying them with needy energy. And number 3, using them like a script instead of a real observation. Because women are incredibly good at detecting when something feels fake. So don't memorize these like pickup lines. Understand the psychology behind them. That's what actually matters. Because attraction is not about tricks. It's about making someone feel seen, understood, and emotionally engaged. And when you do that, you immediately become more memorable than most men. If you want to understand what happens after attraction starts, and how to tell if a woman is secretly attracted to you too, then watch my video about the 7 signs a woman secretly likes you. Because attraction does not always look the way you think it does. Sometimes the signs are subtle, but once you know what to look for, you can never unsee them. And before you go, comment below, which of these 3 phrases do you think would work best for you? And if you enjoyed this video, subscribe. I break down female psychology, attraction, and dating behavior every single week. Thank you for watching, my lovies, and I'll see you in the next video.